pals, I'm here today to talk about the books I've just picked up from the library. So I have 15 new books that I just went to collect with Johnny's help, which is very nice. And what happened is throughout lockdown, when the libraries were closed, you were still allowed to request books to be put aside for you. So I did that. And then in the past couple of months when they've been open again, I've carried on requesting books just because I find it a really easy way to, like, when I hear someone talking about a book that sounds interesting in a video, immediately go and see if the library has it and then like make sure that when I go it's there rather than browsing and realising someone's already borrowed it. And also it means that I don't have to like spend a lot of time in the library because they still currently have you know, lots of social distancing rules and things like that, so I can just pop in, collect the books that are put aside for me and leave, which is what I did. So I'm very excited about this stack because a lot of these books were books that the library had just purchased from the first person to get them. There is a lot of hardbacks, lots of new releases and just lots of books in general that I can't wait to dive into, and I don't actually know which one to read first, so let me know down below if you've read any of these and if you think there's some that, you know, I would love to think that I read all of these before they go back, but because I have, I think, another 15 books on my reservation list, that does mean that if they start coming in, I may have to swap some of these out because the limit for my county is usually 15 books. They've upped it to 20 because of the lockdown rules, which is very nice of them. So yeah, so let me know which ones out of these you think I need to prioritise. So I've sort of sorted them into stacks. I have one short story collection, and that is Male Tears by Benjamin Myers. This came out in April in the UK. Previously, I've always intended to read his fiction because I'm sure he could be a favourite author. I actually tried his memoir and didn't love it. I thought the nature writing was beautiful, but there was also a lot of focus on dead white male poets, which I didn't love. I think I would love this. So this is a short story collection that focuses on, he describes it brilliantly here, the male psyche in all its fragility, complexity and failure, its hubris and forbidden tenderness. Farmers, fairground workers and wandering pilgrims, gruesome gamekeepers, bare-knuckle boxers and ex-cons with secret passions. The men that populate these unsettling, wild and wistful stories form a multifaceted, era-spanning portrait of just what it means to be a man. Which sounds excellent. Johnny thought this was quite amusing when they handed this over to us at the desk because I very rarely read books by men, and I most certainly do not read books that have a man on the cover and the word male in the title. So I think Johnny thought that was quite amusing. But have no fear, I think out of the rest of the stack there's only 2 more books by men, so don't worry, don't worry. So I then have a couple of, I guess, like contemporary novels that are like maybe a bit weird or like magical or horror-y, I'm not really sure. One of those is Bunny by Mona Awad. I heard lots of people talk about this when it came out a couple of years ago, and it was one I was sort of intrigued by but never really intended to pick up. And then I heard loads more people talk about it more recently and it got me very intrigued to give it a go. This could be one that I completely adore or completely hate, hence why I borrowed it from the library rather than purchasing it. So this is about a woman who is studying at a highly selective MFA programme at, I think, a fictitious university, and there is a clique of very twee rich girls who all call one another Bunny. And she thinks they're super weird, but then they invite her to become one of them, and then I think shit gets a bit dark and twisted. So I don't know if this is going to be like a bit witchy or gothic, I'm not sure, but I like the sound of it. And I read the first couple of pages of all of these books actually, because that's something I do when I get a new stack of books from the library, and I was immediately very pulled into this narrative, so I'm hoping I'll love it rather than hate it. But if you read it without spoilers, I'd like to know what your thoughts were down below. And this next one is another one I borrowed because I was unsure if it would be something I could love or could hate, and that is the very beautiful Bestiary by Ming Chang. I'm still unsure how to pronounce this word, and Johnny asked me, he was like, how do you pronounce that? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I have no idea. So I don't know if it's one of those words where people just pronounce it differently, or I don't know. But anyway, what's it about? It is written by a Taiwanese American author, and it follows a family of Taiwanese American women. I think it follows them through 3 generations as they move from Taiwan to America. And this has lots of magical realism in, so I think this is going to get really weird. I used to read a lot of magical realism and loved it, and I just don't read anywhere near as much now, and I think my patience for it has got a lot lower. And so I decided to borrow this because I didn't want to like pay full price for it and then get 30 pages in and be like, this isn't for me. So we shall see. Again, if you read this one, let me know your thoughts down below. And then I have 2 historical fiction novels which both sound great. The first one is The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich. I've read The Roundhouse by this author quite a few years ago and I really enjoyed it, and I have no idea why I haven't picked up more of her books since then. Although I do know that a lot of her books are part of a sort of loosely linked series called, I think, the Love Medicine series. You can read them all as standalones, but they focus around the same group of people. And I want to do that properly and read them in the right order, and so like that's slightly more complicated, whereas this is a standalone, so that makes it a bit easier. I think this is inspired by the life of Louise Erdrich's own grandfather, which sounds really interesting. So it's set in 1953 in rural North Dakota, and we follow a man who was the night watchman at the first factory that opens near the Turtle Mountain Reservation. He's also a prominent Chippewa Council member, and he's deeply troubled by the US government's proposed new emancipation bill, because it is a betrayal threatening the rights of Native Americans to their land and their very identity. And then we follow a woman who works at the factory and is trying to care for her family and also search for her missing sister. And so we follow their stories and I think how they affect future generations, which is something I find really fascinating. And this is a floppy book, which doesn't happen that often in the UK, but seems to be happening a little bit more recently. And so yeah, can't wait to get to it. Let me know if you read that one. The next one I haven't heard anyone talk about. I stumbled across it on Goodreads, randomly my library had it, and so I thought I would give it a go. This is The Paris Savages by Katherine Johnson. This is set in Australia in 1882. It says, a series of brutal massacres has decimated the Badjatala people. Desperate to bring news of their plight to Queen Victoria, Bonnie agrees to sail across the world, unaware he is destined to become a curiosity in the capitals of Europe. And then he has to try and find his way home. Now, I believe Bonnie was a real person who was taken to be a curiosity in human zoos in Europe, which is obviously horrific. And so I was a bit concerned because I don't think this is an own voices story. But I actually had a little look at the start of this, and there is an author's note in which the author has said that rather than assuming Aboriginal viewpoints, the story is told through fictional characters related in the novel to the German engineer Louis Müller, who is known to have transported the group to Europe. So she's telling the story from the perspective of the white people who are actually involved in this horrific act. So I think that could be an interesting viewpoint, but I think I'm going to have a look into some more reviews before I pick this one up. So again, if you've read this one, I would be interested in your thoughts, particularly if you are from Australia, because I assume you will know more about this than most people. And then lastly, I have heard quite a few people talk about this one, but again, I heard like mixed reviews, so I thought I'll borrow it from the library. And that is You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat. This author is Palestinian American, and this follows, I think this is a coming of age show from like adolescence to adulthood of a young queer woman, and it is split between America and the Middle East. And I believe she starts her first sort of serious relationship with another woman, but while she's in that relationship she continues to meet up with lots of other people for sex, and she becomes a bit obsessed. And it says that this is caught between cultural, religious and sexual identities, is a captivating story charting two of our most intense longings for love and a place to call home, which I think sounds wonderful. So I'm hoping I really enjoy this one, and also it has a beautiful cover. And then I have 3 non-fiction books. The first one is Wonderland, A Search for Magic in the Landscape by Jini, Reddy. I've mentioned before that I really like reading nature non-fiction, but I find that nature non-fiction is very much dominated by white middle-class men, and I think a lot of the time their viewpoint is incredibly narrow, and so I try to read a lot in that genre by women. But even more difficult to find is nature non-fiction by women of colour. I just don't think they're published as much, and they're not given anywhere near as many opportunities. So it's always something I'm on the lookout for, and I heard really interesting things about this book. So Jini Reddy was born in London to Indian parents who grew up in apartheid era South Africa, and she was raised in Montreal, Canada. And we follow her throughout Britain as she tries to find magic in the landscape. It says she depicts a whimsical, natural Britain, and she encounters women who worship the goddess, falls deeper in love with her birthland and struggles but mostly fails to get to grips with its lore. It says she offers glimpses of her Canadian childhood and her Indian parents' struggles in an apartheid era South Africa. So this is about roaming both figuratively and imaginary, and like searching for the place we call home. And I just think this sounds really intriguing, so I'm very interested to see what places she visits and describes. And the next book I requested after reading It's Not About the Burka, which was an essay collection with essays from lots of different Muslim women. And one of my favourite essays in the collection was by this author, that author being Mona Eltahawy. And this is Headscarfs and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution. I think she's just had a new book come out, which I really want to read as well, but I thought I would get to this one first, because it has about 10 essays in it. And it says that she has travelled across the Middle East and North Africa, meeting with women and listening to their stories. Her book is a plea for outrage and action on their behalf, confronting the toxic mix of culture and religion that few seem willing to disentangle, lest they blaspheme or offend. So yeah, I think that sounds really intriguing, and I just really liked her voice in the essay I read, so excited for this one. And last for non-fiction, I have a fairly recent release, and that is Biracial Britain, A Different Way of Looking at Race by Remi Adekoya. Remi Adekoya is the son of a Nigerian father and a Polish mother, both of whom live in Britain now. And it says, mixed race Britons are the country's fastest growing minority group. By the end of the century, roughly 1 in 3 of the population will be mixed race, with this figure rising to 75% by 2150. Paradoxically, however, this unprecedented interracial mixing is happening in a world that is becoming increasingly racially polarised. It says, stuck in the middle of these conflicts and outdated understandings of race are mixed race individuals trying to survive and thrive. And in this book he goes to speak to lots of those individuals and find their perspective, and I guess try and explore the mixed race identity, particularly in Britain. I think that sounds fascinating, so I'm really hoping to enjoy this one and get a lot out of it. And then I have one contemporary YA book which I've heard wonderful things about, and that is Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby, Rivera. So this follows a young Puerto Rican girl who is gay, and it says, in a summer full of queer dance parties, a fling with a motorcycling librarian, and intense explorations of sexuality, feminism and identity, Juliet's about to learn what it means to really come out to the world, to her family, to herself. I think this has been beautifully published. I was really happy to see actually that inside this book the library have printed this little leaflet saying, do you have any great LGBT plus books or authors to recommend? This library would like suggestions on books with LGBT plus representation so that we can expand our selection on offer. And you can fill it in and write the title, the author and why you enjoyed the book, and then it also says, would you like to have a separate LGBT plus section, and you can tick yes or no. I thought that was really nice. I'm assuming they check that every time the book is returned. Yeah, and I just thought that was a nice touch, particularly for teenagers who use their local library. The rest are fantasy. I'm trying to get back into reading fantasy. When I find fantasy I love, I get so much joy out of it. I try and read quite a bit of fantasy, but I DNF'd loads. I've DNF'd, I think, around 40 books already this year, and I haven't been speaking about them all because it's a lot, and I can't be bothered. I might mention some at random points throughout the year, but I'm not keeping up with it as much as I did previously just because there's so much. But I have high hopes that some of these books at least will work for me, and I will finish them and get to talk to you about them. So firstly I have 2 YA fantasy books. The first one being Fable by Adrienne Young. So I think this is part of a series, but I don't really get it because I think the next book in the series has already been released, so I think they were both released at the same time in paperback. I don't really know, maybe you know more than I do. So we follow a daughter of the most powerful traders in the Narrows. The sea is the only home 17-year-old Fable has ever known, and she's been left by her father, and she just has this big adventure and there's loads of pirates and stuff, and everybody has said that it is really gripping, you are ensnared by it and you just won't want to stop reading, which is something I really enjoy about YA in general, so I'm hoping I'll just speed read through this one. And I'm hoping the same happens with this next one, and that is the Glenevere Deception. Is that how you say that name? I think it is, by Kietsten. This is a pretty cool cover. I looked into books that were about the Arthurian legends after really enjoying both The Lost Queen by Signe Pike and Legend Born by Tracy Deonn. And I was like, I don't really know much about King Arthur and the Round Table and all that stuff, but I enjoy reading fantastical retellings. So in this book we follow Princess Guinevere, who has come to Camelot to wed King Arthur. And it says, the catch is that her real name and her true identity is a secret. She is a changeling, a girl who has given up everything to fight for Camelot. It says, deadly jousts, duplicitous knights, and forbidden romances are nothing compared to the greatest threat of all. The girl with the long, knotted black hair riding on horseback through the woods towards Arthur. Because when your whole existence is a lie, how can you even trust yourself? Epic. So I hope that's good, because I think the library has the next two in the trilogy. And then I also have 3 adult fantasy books, and I think all 3 of these are pretty recent releases. So we have, this is sort of traditional epic fantasy, and that is Sword of Fire by Katherine Kerr. It's an absolutely beautiful cover, I hope you can see that. And it's quite a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be, 370 pages, fairly small font, but I might pick this one up fairly soon. So the reason I borrowed this one and not bought it is because I tried to read one of her much earlier books. It must have been her first book, called Dagger Spell, which I think was published in like the 90s. And I was doing okay with it, it wasn't great. And then there was incest, which isn't something I'm completely against reading, but it was incest in a pretty like gross way. Like, it just wasn't nice, and I just felt concerned that any author would want to write it in that way. So I immediately stopped reading it. However, I feel like maybe where we are now in 2021, it's quite a long time has passed since that book was published, and I think our expectations of what we, will see and accept in fantasy books has shifted. And so I'm hoping she's moved with the times, and this could be a really great book. So it is in the kingdom that was in that original series. I don't know if all of her books are in the same world, but the kingdom is called Bestiary. And basically this bard is killed, I don't know why, because he is trying to start like a revolution, I think. And Alyssa is his protege, and she discovers evidence that may overthrow the system that keeps her people downtrodden. And it says that we follow her. She also has a chance encounter with a rough but handsome stranger. It's a riot in the streets, and Alyssa charges into a mission that needs her whether she's ready or not. And also, there is like sort of an epic line. There's always like an epic line at the end of fantasy blurbs, and it says, the time has come to burn away injustice. So there's that one. Let me know if you've read it yet. Let me know if you've read any of her other books, and maybe they didn't include incest and they were better. I don't know. This next one I heard Rincey over at Rincey Reads talk about. I'll try and find the video where I heard her review this one, because I just thought it sounded really interesting and fun. And that is The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. And I think this is like a combination of Regency romance with fantasy, which sounds pretty exciting, and I feel it could just be a real fun, quick read. So we follow a young woman who is a sorceress who practices magic in secret. And in this world, when women are married, they get a collar put on them that locks away all their magic. And so she's trying really hard to not only not get married, because she doesn't want her magic to be locked away, but she's also trying to find some secret by looking for like an ancient text that will, I don't know, allow her to become a fully fledged mage, it says. And then she does like meet a guy who she has the hots for, so it's like, do I want the magic or do I want him? I don't know. It sounds like it could be really fun. And then the last one is The Forever Sea by Joshua Philip Johnson. This is quite a chunky boy. It is nearly 600 pages. So we follow a young woman called Kindred Greyreach, which is quite a cool name. She's the half firekeeper and sailor aboard the Errant. And in this world, ships sail through like wheat fields, which sounds like pretty beautiful. And her grandmother, who is a legendary captain, steps from her vessel into the Forever Sea, which is like this wheat field. but she leaves a note to her granddaughter which suggests that it wasn't suicide, and so we follow this young woman as she tries to, I think, run the ship and also look into the mystery of what happened to her grandmother. I'm hearing mixed things about this one. Some people are saying that it's really interesting, but the world building's really cool, but like the plot itself doesn't really go anywhere. So have you read it? What did you think of it? I would be intrigued to know your thoughts. That is the 15th book, so yeah. I don't know which one I will read first. I feel like maybe I'm up for a fantasy. I also am super intrigued by Bunny, as I said. Also, Male Tears is calling to me. So yeah, which one? What should I pick up? Let me know down below if you've read any of these. I'd love to know your thoughts. And also, have you got any books on hold or reservation at the library? And what ones are you most excited to pick up? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!